Doing this scavenger hunt is quite relevant and easy because the situation is very low stakes. Yes or no? Yes. Okay. I can tell you that I wish I had some preparation when 7-8 years ago, has anybody heard of the New Bedford raid here in Massachusetts where there was 361 migrants that were detained at a factory? Okay, some people haven't heard. There was a major raid. 361 people got detained at a factory 7 years ago. Okay, one morning immigration came, 700 agents came and took all those people in. 3 of us went to New Bedford to respond to the raid. There were about 1,000 families that were part of those 361 people that were affected. It was madness for 2 months. Okay? And I wish I had some of the tools to understand this, because it wasn't like we were doing one of the ships. All the ships were going in at the same time with not a lot of coordination. Okay? And there was real stakes. Like we lost half of the people to deportation. So what I mean to say is that this is not about, we can get debriefing our scavenger hunt as much as we want. Yes or no? And I don't expect that we're going to do things perfectly out in the world. I actually don't think that is even possible. Are you following me on this? But it's how can we be the most strategic in how we set up the way we do work? Who agrees with this? Say aye. Aye. That is the most important thing. Okay? And I can tell you, there's people that are not in this country because we didn't do our best job. And I take part of responsibility of that. Follow me on this? So there's different kinds of stakes for different kinds of moments. The second thing that I want to ask you is that if we want to change this country, if we want to change this world, if we want to dismantle all the crazy madness of systems of oppression that we have going on around across the world, we need a lot of people. So it's easy for us to think about how 50 people get organized. How about 50,000? How about 500,000? That is the game for us. Are you following me on this? So what I want you to think just for 2 seconds, individually for a second, is in your organization, in your movement, in your mission, whatever that is for you, what is the amount of people that you actually need to succeed? Okay? You don't have to do much research. You can do this just with whatever's in your gut. But how many people do you need to engage? This is the key question on this. Are you following me there? How many people need to engage? You take 1 minute, 2 minutes. Just think about it right now in silent. Go into your notebook. If you have a number, raise your hand. If you have a number, raise your hand. Okay, seems like a little bit over half of the room. I want to hear some numbers. Yes?
There are 2.5 million domestic workers about in the country, and so we'd like to organize 250,000 of them by 2020.
250,000. Can somebody please? Thank you so much, Ellen.
250,000 as members, and we estimate we need about 600,000 contacts to make that happen.
So 250,000 as members, 600,000 as contacts. Thank you. Others. Randall.
6 million white people. That's 3.5% of the white people in the U.S.
Okay, good. Six.
I can't do zeros very well.
Somebody else, please, that wants to swarm to this. Thank you so much. Thank you, Helen. 6 million white people, which is 3.5% of the white population of this country. Is that what you said? Okay, great. Thank you. Yes?
We need, I think, 25,000 Virginia students.
25,000? Virginia students. Great, thank you. By the way, we're not doing a competition who has the biggest number. We just want to know what number you need. Right? The whole point is we're working together. Other numbers, yes?
Mine's a much smaller number because I'm thinking about how we're moving towards trying to do a lot more training and train a lot of students to be trainers, and so I'm thinking 25.
25 students, great. Across the state, great. Others. But that's not, you're not answering my question. My question is, how many people do you need to engage in your organization? It's a different number. That's a segment of your organization. Is that correct? Okay, good. Want to know the big number. You can say it's 1,000, 2,000, 200. What's the overall number? Yes, sir.
Almost everyone.
Almost everyone. So 7 billion. Are we in 7 billion plus people already? Okay, so 7 billion people. Yes.
11 million people, which is the number of undocumented people, but also 3.5% of the population,
Less 3.5. So it's
which
same
is
number.
important.
Go. Great to support. Great. Diego.
3.5% of the community we want to target, that we still not sure which one we want to target.
Okay, good. So maybe let's come up with a number. Yes?
140,000.
140,000. Can you tell us more about your number?
Sorry, 540,000.
500.
10% of the Jews in the United States.
Oh, wow. 10% of the Jewish community in the U.S. Great. Anybody who has a number lower than 5,000, raise your hand. Let me ask you something. Is this a good question, yes or no?
No.
Why not?
I struggle with this question because, like, we're part of movements.
Yes.
And so, like, our movements need to reach, like, a shit ton of people. But, like, how quantifying, like, what any one given organization needs to activate and engage is a lot more challenging. And
Yes.
yeah, I don't know.
Can I ask a question, though?
Yeah.
She's immigrant rights movement, right? She said 11 million people. Out of those, we need some of her numbers. Is that true or not? What she's saying from the domestic workers. Is that true or not? Sure. But that she needs to subtract those 640, yes or no? No. She needs to figure out how to add them, but add them in a different way. Are you following this? Yes. Okay, so I'm not saying all in your individualism as an organization. Now, this is why I love you, Evan. We're gonna. I thought they had this whole thing. Sorry, I'm like pretending I have something going in the background. So I want to talk for a second around scale, which is very, very important, right? And there's two types of scales that we want to talk about. The first one is scale within, and within is whatever people are considered as part of the field. Okay, what is the scale within? So, for example, I am sorry. What is your name? Rosie. Rosie said she wants to engage 250,000. You said as members, right? So those are people that are feeling like they're part of the national domestic workers. Is that correct? Great. So that's what she's trying to engage. But there's also other people that you're in relationship, not within but across, like the day laborers, the National Day Laborers Network. Is that correct? Or other immigrant membership organizations. Are you following me on this? Okay. So the question that I'm trying to ask you, some of you might say, Carlos, like we need 7 billion people. I agree. We need to organize, and maybe there's a less percentage. We need a large percentage of the world population to engage if we all aggregate our numbers. Are you following me on this? We might need to develop that someday. For the people that are thinking about the movement of movements, can rock and roll and develop that. We need more experiments on that. Rock and roll on that. Okay? But we're also trying to get very concrete, as Sam said, because there's so much wisdom in the last session she did, that is so important, the experiments that we do within. Is that true or not? It's how many people we're doing. We had 50 people a scavenger hunt. What do we mean to do with 250,000? And also, when we scale across, this is the thing that it's important, is that we are referring that we want to build this shape. Does that make some sense? That's what this training is for. There's other trainings for the other shapes, right? But this shape, when they're in relationship, they are not technically in relationship with only shapes like this. Are you following me on this? They're in relationship with chapter organizations, with email lists, with traditional organizations, so forth and so on. Are you following me on this? That is what we call scale across. Okay? And we call that also, as part of our momentum training, movement ecology. Okay? And that is a whole other thing, which is how do you organize across different organizational cultures? Okay? Because if I were running a general strike, okay, and we at Cosecha have a very decentralized structure, the National Domestic Workers Alliance, right, are not going to say, well, we'll just take that structure of Cosecha. They already have a structure and a culture, yes or no? And they will do it within. So the question is, how do we build another organization that can hold their structure and our structure and so forth and so on? Can you see how crazy this can get? Okay, now why do we put this slide here? This is important. Why do we put this slide here? It's because some of you are going to ask questions around this, and some of you are going to answer questions around within. Okay? Some of you are going to be like, well, Carlos, or well, Sam, can we not talk about the 50 people scavenger hunt? Can we talk about the movements of movements of movements of movements? Who's been part of that conversation before or heard somebody said that? The meta of the meta. You can go and rock and roll and design that if you want. It's awesome. We need one of those, right? But actually, most experiments are not, we're not going to put all of our resources into one meta experiment. Are you following me on this? So what we're talking in this training is how can we figure out, what I want you to figure out is if Rosie's saying 250,000, this group is going to be broken down in a lot of different subgroups, yes or no? It's to figure out what is the unit of organization of that. Is it 50 people? Is it 30 people? Is it 100 people? Is it 7 people? What is the unit? Are you following me on this? When she's saying 250,000, she's not saying all of them as part of one group. Is this making, Rosie, unless I'm, okay, good. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, perfect. I just want to, Ijen might be mad at me. Okay, good. Not one group, right? But we're saying that there's multiple little groupings within them. Are you following me on this? And what we want you to work, you're going to have more time later when Lizzie and James start talking about it. We're going to talk about the scales within. And we have some language about that, okay? So actually, I'm not going to go through this right now, but I'm going to go through this first. Within. We have some language where you can do it in other ways, and I want to tell you why we decided on these numbers. So we already have, we consider a circle or a team 3 to 7 people, okay? And the reason why we have the number 3 to 7, or no more than 7, right? And we have arguments about this, is because when you are in a relationship between 2 people, there's only one relationship. Are you following me on this, right? If at the end, what's your name, my brother? Zakaria. Zakaria and I, if we are working on something today, we just got to take care of our relationship. It's one. But now Zakaria, Henry, and I are working together. Now we have to take care of 3 relationships. We have one relationship with him, I have one relationship with Henry, and Henry has one relationship with him. 3 relationships. If people follow me on this, it's more to take care of. If you go to 5 people in a group, now we're talking about 10 relationships. Because it's not just this, it's also across, and that's happening. Are you following me on this? If you keep growing the number, now in a group of 7, you have 21 relationships. Now at this point, you just add one more person, and it's 28 relationships. Okay, you add one more to group of 9, it's 36 relationships. In the book Swarmwise, which is, we're going to send it as part of your reading list. It's very well recommended you read this book. This is where this information comes from. What they argue is that it is hard to self-organize rapidly when you have to negotiate so much relationship. I'm going to say that one more time. That it's hard to organize rapidly or efficiently when you have to negotiate so much relationship. So they consider that when you're between 7 and 8, you have to now spend 30% of the group's time working on relationships, more than here. Just because you have more people. Are you following me on this? And the more people you add, the more you have to do at working the relationship. Okay? So that's why we decided on the grouping of 7. Now you can choose another number. We're just giving you their thinking. Is that okay? Okay. So that's what we consider a circle. When you add circles together, like 3 to 5 circles together of around 30 people, we call this a community. Okay? You can call it something else, but that's just a name that we're calling it, a community. And then when you have 3 to 5 communities together, that is a village. Are you following me on this? You still have the little circles, but now you have the subgroupings. Is this making some sense? So even if you were in your learning circles, there's multiple learning circles technically in those facilitators and coordinators groups. There's all that. There's the small ones, there's the bigger group, and there's the large kind of the whole training here. If you want to go bigger, there's the village, which is what we call the region, which is 3 to 5 villages, so forth and so on. One little unit to another unit to another unit to allow organization. Okay? You can call this a different language. I know EFNA now calls their village hive. Is that correct? So people can use different words for that formation around scale. The number 150, for me, is very obsessive. And let me tell you why. Okay? Has anybody heard of Dunbar's number? Okay, only one, 2, 3. Okay, very few people. But Dunbar's number, essentially what it's saying is that that as human beings biologically, it's difficult for us to hold more than 150 relationships at the same time. It's very difficult for us to get into 200, 300. So what it's happening is that if you enter a room of 150 people and suddenly you add 30 more, biologically your level of trust decreases dramatically and you feel unsafe, even if nothing has happened. Are you following me on this? And you feel like your tribal identity is not there anymore because there's more people in the room. Is this making some sense? Right? So in some ways, how important trust is How important is trust again? So important. So the way that we even design the groupings have to make sense with the physical experience of how people feel safe, how they feel hurt. Are you following me on this? You might feel semi-safe here, but you might not feel full trust. You might feel more trust in your circle with your small crew, yes or no? You might feel that this is your extended family and that this is a tribe if you put in those numbers. That's the other thing about this, okay? Are you following me on this? And as you go, as you go, as you go. What we're going to talk later with Lizzie and James is how can we organize ourselves in this formation of a village? What are some ideas? What are some models? Are you following me on this? And what we want to figure out, if we have better models of working together in 150 people, wouldn't that be awesome? Yes or no? Because we have a lot of small circle going on and some community, but holy guacamole, if we can really rock the 150 people doing a scavenger hunt that feels like we were super organized and well done, that will feel amazing. Are you following me on that? Okay, deep breaths, everybody. Any questions around some of the scales we are showing? Yes, Akeem.
Like how, like on a scale of 1 to 10, like how suggestive are these suggestions? Because I tried doing this. I tried doing this with like a campus, like the statewide student association model, and like we had like a lot of disagreements with exactly how it would scale up, and so we weren't sure about like what if different circumstances may call for different scales, and to like what extent are the differences?
Yes, for sure. No, yes, for sure. Well, you can choose whatever you want. I think when we're talking about creating your DNA, is it important that you say what's the size of a group, yes or no? So you can decide what that is, but it's important that you say it because there could be different ways of looking at that. Some people could say, well, you say we just have to be in groups. We're a group of 100 people. Are you following me on this? Now, this doesn't imply also, Akeem, I don't know if this is what you said, so I'm just going to tell you my own interpretation, that this is the way you grow. That is not what we're meaning. That's not the way you have to scale up. We're just saying, at this grouping of 750 people, this is what we call this thing, which might be parts of all these things, but you can come up with your own scale. We're just trying to provide some cohesion to explain that madness of the numbers. So I'll give you an example. How many of you are part of chapter organizations or something like that? How many of you, with your chapter organizations, do regional meetings? Raise your hands again, all the people that do chapters. And keep your hands up if you do regional meetings. Okay, so I'll give you an example. There's many groups that have national networks and local networks, but no regional. And there's not a structure for regional, so then regional never happens because there's not a setup structure for that. Is this making some sense? So in some ways, when people say, okay, Carlos, we have a village here in Somerville, we have another village in Cambridge, we have another village there, what is the next thing we are? So providing language and providing clarity that, okay, yeah, you have village assemblies or gatherings or meetings, but now you also need regional assemblies if you want to coordinate yourselves in that way. And then you can break it down. Well, what if it's all of Greater Boston and Worcester? Do we have a state region? You can go crazy. But that is what provides the emergence. Yes?
So what happens if you get, you have a circle of 7 people, then one more person wants to join? What happens to that circle, and what happens with those relationships?
Fatima.
What would you say?
We've thrown around a lot of ideas. Does it split? Do you encourage that person to start their own circle? But what if they're kind of like a green person who isn't very secure in the movement yet?
Yeah, you make that decision as you go, but yeah, splitting looks different in different ways. You could go 4 and 4, and then those 4 support that one person, so then do another one, but the growth is constant. The question though is how strict are you in keeping to the 7 people?
Yeah, and how do you also regulate, is that something that you regulate? Is that just in the DNA? How do you have any?
Well, there's tons of it. Fatima, we can brainstorm for a while, yes. But I just also want to say that this question she's asking is a key question of replication. And I just want to say most of the growth we're talking about here is replicable. We're not saying only grow from 7 to no, we're saying more like boop, 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 ooh, 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 boop, boop. That's what we're saying. Yes, Fatih.
I just wanted to add that there's a level of experimentation to it as well, right? And that, like, even if you say 7, really, if you are 8 and it's working beautifully and perfectly, then, like, keep the 8 in some ways, you know, and that what you will notice maybe is that after some time, you'll feel it in your being that something's a little off, but you don't know what it is, and that's a good guide. Like that there's a little too many people, that these meetings are taking too long, that it's like, it's already starting to form 2 groups. What we're saying is let's be explicit about it so that it like can happen, as opposed to stay in a dysfunctional state for too long.
And it's also important because the splitting, most of the time splitting in groups, is taken as a bad story. I'm going to say that one more time. The most important thing you can write in your notebook. The splitting, the way people split groups, they have a story that most of the times is negative. Because we have an expectation that we always have to group the group together. So if you bring 300 people to a room, then it's like, well, we have to form 2 networks. And underneath, there is a need for more closeness between them 2 that 300 cannot provide. But then there's a story created. That, well, you were that and we're this thing or whatever. Are you following me on this? So we're trying to talk about how do you actually deal with that dynamic proactively instead of con reacción. How do you say that in English? That thing. Okay, let's finish this thing. Okay, so cool. No more of this. So we're going to stop right there. Is anybody clear with the skills within some of that? Yes? You can pick. You can say we can only focus on 7 people, on 30 people, rock and roll. 150 people. You can decide. We're going to give you some little tools for that later. Would that be okay? Great. Some of you, if you want to do the meta movement, please rock and roll. It's very complex. And whoever comes up with some good models, please tell us we need help. But it's also needed. You want to follow it? So we just want to say that there is 2. The last thing I want to do before we take you to lunch is take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Beautiful. Please look to the person left and right, and together write down what are 2 to 3 major things you're learning from this morning. Write down in your notebook, on each other's notebook. Right now, go. We don't have enough time. Go.